Okay, so when we left off, we had named our roots, trunks, divisions, chords, and branches, okay? But now we need to understand the divisions and how they break up and the naming convention for the divisions. So, remember when I said that the names of the parts of the brachial plexus are named, they get their names by their relation to this invisible axillary artery that's running all the way through, all right? So, like we said in the last video, if we look at our trunks, for instance, our superior trunk is named superior trunk because it falls superior or higher or top or above our axillary artery. Our inferior trunk is named our inferior trunk because it falls inferior to or lower than or below, down, in relation to our axillary artery, okay? And the same is the convention all the way through when we have our lateral, posterior, and our medial chords as well. Just like for our trunks and our chords, our divisions are going to be named in a similar way, okay? And the reason why I held off was because it's easier to understand the divisions if you understand what comes after, what comes closer to our fingers, okay? So, our superior trunk and our inferior trunk, here and here, as we go down towards our fingers, as we continue down, we see that our superior trunk is going to branch here. So it's going to go from here, and our superior trunk is going to give off a branch, right? This thick branch here. And our inferior trunk is going to do the same thing. So we have our inferior trunk here. It's going to continue on, and it's going to give a branch here, right? So I've kind of boldened it. These two segments that come off of our superior and our inferior trunk are called our posterior divisions, okay? So this part here and this part here are our posterior divisions. I'm going to put the word post. I'm going to put the word post here. It's kind of hard to see in the marker, but these are our posterior divisions. This one here and this one here. The reason we can remember that there are posterior divisions is because they're going to go and enter into our posterior cord that we already drew, okay? So if we imagine information, so remember, nerves are pathways. They are pathways that carry information so that our bodies can do what we want them to do. The brachial plexus in particular is a pathway that travels from our neck to our fingers. We want to imagine, just for the sake of understanding this concept, we want to imagine information traveling in one direction. It's a one-way path going from our neck all the way to our fingers, okay? A one-way path going in this direction. So our superior and our inferior cords are going to travel down the extent of our arm. They're going to branch off and into posterior divisions, and they're going to form this posterior cord. These divisions are called posterior divisions because they would be behind our artery that would lie right here, okay? So our superior and our inferior trunk, as they continue down the path towards our fingers, they're going to branch off and they're going to create two posterior divisions. Those posterior divisions are going to create our posterior cord. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay? Now, our middle trunk is going to create a different division. Our middle trunk, we see our middle trunk right here. it's going to continue up and have this branch right here. I'm actually going to highlight that branch. I'll give it a color. Okay. So, our middle trunk, we're, again, imagining information traveling from our neck all the way down to our fingers. It's a one-way pathway. Information is traveling this way, okay? So our middle trunk is going to give off a branch. And this branch is going to be our anterior branch, okay? So I'm going to write A-N-T. So this yellow branch right here is our anterior branch. So our middle trunk gives off a branch, an anterior division, okay? And our superior trunk right here, notice that a part of its branch, like we said before, goes posterior. But this other part of the branch right up here, this part, that part is going to be an anterior branch. So I'm going to write anterior there, and I'll highlight this part. So let's start again. We have our trunks. Our trunks are split up into 3 segments: a superior trunk, a middle trunk, and an inferior trunk. Our superior trunk, as it continues traveling all the way down to our fingers, our superior trunk is going to branch, and that's when we're going to get our divisions. Our superior trunk is going to have an anterior division right up here, and it's going to have a posterior division, this thick black division right here. Okay? Our middle trunk is also going to branch off. Our middle trunk is going to give off an anterior division. It's going to meet up with this other anterior division all the way up here. But our middle trunk is also going to give off another segment, another branch right here. And this branch is a posterior division. So the names of the divisions are always going to be anterior or posterior. So this thick black segment here is a posterior division. All right, P-O-S-T. So we have a posterior division coming from our superior trunk. We have a posterior division coming from our middle trunk. And we have a posterior division coming from our inferior trunk. All right? We saw before that our superior trunk, it had 2 branches. It's split into an anterior division and a posterior division, right? Our superior trunk split into an anterior and a posterior division. Our middle trunk split into a posterior division and an anterior division, all right? And our inferior trunk down here, we already saw that it's split into a posterior division here. But what about this? This segment of the brachial plexus is going to go anteriorly. This is our anterior division right here. Okay. Now, let's take a breath. I know that seems like a lot of information, but it may be easier to think about if we look at what comes next down here. Remember what I said. The names of the brachial plexus, the segments, are named because of their relation to our axillary artery, okay? Or any artery, whatever the name of the artery is called. So, as we saw in our trunks with the superior and inferior, how we named them, the same is true in our divisions, the same is true in our chords. We noticed that our posterior divisions all led up, this thick black arrow, our posterior divisions all are going to meet up with our posterior cord right here, okay? And our anterior divisions that are highlighted in yellow are all going to meet up in one of two places, either our lateral cord or our medial cord. So information traveling through all the way down through to our fingers, it's going to go from our roots to our trunks. From our trunks, it's going to split up, and we're going to have information, anterior information is going to, up here, is going to come through our lateral cord, and anterior information down here is going to come through our medial cord, okay? So the way that Tice likes to ask this on tests, because this gets a little bit confusing. An example question can be, the ulnar nerve has components of what part of the brachial plexus, or has components of what division of the brachial plexus, for instance. So we have our ulnar nerve right here, but she wants to know what divisions make up our ulnar nerve. So we start at the beginning. We know that the roots that make up the ulnar nerve are C8 and T1. We just keep traveling. We know that the trunk that makes up the ulnar nerve is the inferior trunk. We know that the divisions that make up the ulnar nerve, because information is only traveling in one direction. Information is only traveling in one direction. So we know the anterior division makes up the ulnar nerve. So if the question was what division makes up the ulnar nerve, we would say the anterior division. If the question was what trunk makes up the ulnar nerve, we would say the inferior trunk. The same for what roots are components of the ulnar nerve. We would say C8 and T1. Because information is flowing in one direction and it's all contributing to this final ulnar nerve. I hope that makes sense. Send me a text if it does not.